I wanted to ask everybody a question. Each of you brings something unique to the table, but together you all make up the Ferguson Alliance advisory team. If you could sum up the team in just one word, what word would you choose? And I'm going to start with Jan.
I think I would choose collaborative.
Collaborative. Good
Yes,
one.
we work very well together.
Brandy?
I'm going to go with dynamic. We are all very individualized, but when we come together, we really represent a lot of different viewpoints and angles.
Dynamic and collaborative. Two good choices right there. Jay, your thoughts, your one word.
Lots and lots of energy.
Energy. Great word. Last but not least, Rob.
Passion.
Good.
What about you, Price?
Me? I would say growing.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
We're all growing ourselves and growing the team and growing family businesses.
For sure.
So that action word. All right, here's our hypothetical scenario. Daughter of a family business owner goes into the owner, her dad, and requests a 15% raise. So the question is, should you give a family member a 15% raise in this scenario? Feel free to debate strategy and talk some family dynamics.
I would say that it depends on whether or not they started this daughter out at an extremely low salary because of the fact that she was a family member and just learning, and if her salary was not comparable to other people in a similar position in the company. But I would really move with caution if that's not the case. I think the answer to that would be no, they shouldn't. They should give her the same type of raise that they're giving everyone else in a similar position. Brandy, I see you nodding your head. What do you say?
Yeah, I definitely think that, first analyzing, putting the daughter stuff aside, thinking about the position that they're in and what's the fair market rate for that, and starting there. That would be my starting point. My initial default was like, yeah, give it to her. She's probably below market value if I had to guess, but
And Brandy,
that's just my...
But you're speaking like a daughter-in-law of a family business.
Yeah.
So I knew you would probably say yes. In fact, give her more. But I think
she'd probably be an undercut. That's my initial assessment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this does come up quite a bit. I mean, we see this with our clients, and I think it really comes down to what's the business philosophy. We have a lot of family businesses that are there for the benefit of the family, and they tend to have a philosophy, what we call as a family first business. That's fine. Like you said, Jan, it depends. You probably wouldn't do it. And I think the answer is if you're a family first business, then you do what you think is best for the family at that point in time. But all of us here at Ferguson Alliance, we really subscribe to business first family. And the reason for that is that philosophy tends to be a lot longer lasting. It seems to generate greater prosperity. And so with that, I would agree with what Jan was saying is well, we need to make sure that it's on par with what the decision was made for the whole company. And so, but it depends. You didn't give us enough context, Bryce, as to was she underpaid or... Yeah.
We can have some fun and create some context.
Yeah, let's do that.
We can debate some different scenarios, whether it's job promotion, taking on more responsibility, or she's been there tenured, she's been there 10, 15 years. I'd love to hear feedback on each one of those points from everybody.
Well, I would treat her, if the business is a business first family, the daughter should be treated the same as any other employee who would make a request like that. Hopefully, if they have been working with us, employees wouldn't be making requests for pay raises because it'd be recognized in a proactive manner. There would be an annual compensation review that happens for all employees all at the same time. So my personal belief is if an employee is asking for a pay raise, it's probably too late. You're underappreciating that employee. The expectations and the value of that employee aren't well understood. by either the company or the employee.
Great point. I'm curious, just from the work that everybody's done, do you see more regularly that family members are underpaid in the family business and kind of under market value, or are they getting overpaid market value?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I think it's a mixed bag. Some companies you see that because you're a family member, they pay you less for some reason. Many times it's just that you're just learning, you just stepped in but in this case, if she's been there 15 years, that wouldn't be the case. But from what I've seen, they usually get paid more because they're a family member. But I think it's a mixed bag.
I think it depends on the role and whether or not they're an owner. There's a lot of family members that work in the business, but they don't have any ownership, so they don't enjoy maybe additional compensation with distributions. I think most of the clients that we work with today, they're on par with the market. But it is true, when we start with some family businesses, there's could be some huge disparity or gaps between a family member. I remember working in one family office, 17 cousins were there. Probably only 2 of them were actually doing any work. The others were getting paid excessive amounts of salary and bonus and benefits for no work at all. And of course, we had to help the ownership see that and understand it, and it all got balanced and fixed pretty quickly, quite honestly, because that was causing a lot of problems in the business itself. But I would say today our clients are on par with the market.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen more that they're underpaid from market than over.
Again, speaking as a former family member in a family business.
It's always great insight from a former family member in a family business.
Right.
I think it's a little bit to what Jan is saying. Like, sometimes you're starting out in like a learning type environment. And so you are put a little bit lower. And then, as you grow and gain your skills, it speaks to a much bigger layer of psychology in it, and that there's the dynamics of the family. You're the child and they're the parent, and it's very hard for that to change even as the child becomes an adult. And so it is very complex.
And I think, Bryce, I'll just jump in to take the complexity out of it and to kind of clean it up, so to speak, if there is disparity, that's where you have to unify around a compensation philosophy.
Yeah.
And Brandy, you might remember doing that work is, okay, well, what is our philosophy of how we're going to compensate family members, how we're going to compensate executives, managers, leaders? I mean, where do we want to be in the market, both from maybe our fixed compensation as well as our variable compensation? Once that philosophy gets established, that then is the cornerstone of all your future decisions. I think that's an important exercise to go through with the shareholders of a family business first. And then you can execute that compensation philosophy each and every year with each and every employee.
And maybe even to back it up a little bit further than that is first start with best person for the job, regardless of is it a family member or not. Starting with that philosophy of what are your hiring practices going to be, and yeah,
agreed.
Rob, you touched on it a little bit earlier, and I wanted to recircle back to it, but you mentioned something with ownership stake. So what's the big difference if you have a daughter or son-in-law in the family business with no ownership stake and their wages compared to with ownership stake? And at what point in that relationship and that work life do you start seeing more ownership taken on by their children, the next generation?
Well, again, it depends on where the family is, or their first generation or third generation, or so that's part of it. But if we just go with the founding generation, first generation, to bring children or second generation nephews or nieces in I agree with Brandy. They've got to be qualified first and foremost to work in the business. Are they qualified for a work position, and should they come in at a entry level, or should they come in at a higher level? I think best practice is they should come in at whatever they're skilled at, and at that level. To get ownership, that is part of succession planning. And I know we'll touch on that maybe in future episodes, but the shareholders need to make a decision of when and how they're going to transition the ownership of the company and the leadership of the company. And they need to do that in conjunction of how are we going to transition wealth of the company, because they may have children that aren't going to be in the company at all. And so they need to be able to balance, I guess, in a fair way, how ownership in a business and wealth transition are all going to work homogeneously. But you do that in your succession plan, and it's usually multiple years down the road for a family member to get ownership, as well as non-family members too. That's something that we help make those decisions for owners, is when do we let executives, or should executives have ownership in our business. And so again, that's a whole nother conversation about when's the right time to do that, or is it even a good idea to do that.
Well, I can attest that Ferguson Alliance is a business first over family, just because I just recently joined and I know where I stand. I'm at the bottom. I'm the associate. So it's good to hear and witness that you're practicing what you preach.
Yes, and you're probably under market a little bit, but that's okay.
Probably, but that's okay.
We're feeling like you're management ready, though, Price.
We're
really shooting for you to get that manager title.
Yep, I'm getting in the overtime. Brandy, you on the same token, you said that being in a family business, that probably family members are underpaid, and is that something with perception of the founding generation or second generation, of looking at the lower generations of, I remember changing this person's diaper, or I remember them spilling milk all over the room. Is it hard for the leading generation to get those perspectives out of their head?
It can be. I think, there's a lot of different dynamics that can play into it. It is maybe they came up in the business more through experience than like education and experience in another business. Sometimes in order to pay someone else better, the family doesn't pay themselves a fair market rate. And there's a lot of different reasons why that is. But yeah, I would just say I have seen that be more the case, more than them being, overpaid.
Did you personally ever feel like you were the outsider girlfriend, kind of distracting your now husband in the family business?
Let's think about that. No,
They just put you straight to work.
Yeah, they did. And actually, you know what? I really prided myself on making sure that the people that I worked with felt like I earned my seat at the table. And I actually had people from time to time tell me like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that you and Neil were married, and they had been working with me. It was customers, it was vendors. They'd been working with me for years. And so, I just really made that. I wanted my actions to really speak louder than any of my status or anything like that. So I did. I hit the ground running as a hard worker. And
so it's safe to say you let your work speak for yourself, and you never asked the boss for a raise, even when it was getting close to planning the wedding and maybe honeymoon.
I'm a very fiscally responsible lady. So it was never so much about that. Yeah, there were definitely times when I felt like I should get more money, but that was more just driven off of thinking about what I was bringing to the table and what value I was adding to the organization, and the responsibilities that I had taken on. So I feel really good about that, strong about that. And also I was educating myself too, just around what is the market value of the role that I am taking on, and what does that look like? Am I being compensated fairly? I like to think I have a pretty objective view on it. But yeah, it can also get hard when you also, as a family member, know how much everyone in the organization makes. That's another challenging component to the dynamic as a family member. And so as you work closely with people and see their output and their work ethic, and if you know that they make more than you, you've got to kind of check yourself from time to time and not let that impact how you carry yourself.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more on the personal side, Brandy. I see Jan just sitting over there itching to get a word in. Jan, what do you have for everybody?
Well, I think to your question for Brandy, I think sometimes it's harder if you're a family member being brought into the company because other people are like, well, why did they bring her in? You know, even though you may be completely qualified and completely deserving of the role you've been given, it's not necessarily jealousy, but just other attitudes of, well, why did they bring her or him into that instead of giving it to me? And I think it makes it harder for the family member. You have to prove yourself, where someone coming in without being a family member may not have that same stigma.
Yeah, that's right, Jan. In fact, I was just thinking as listening to both you and Brandy talk about this, there was a family business where I was the non-family member CEO, first time in over 100 years. So it was a fifth generation business. And that family had a tradition of only the boys could actually work in the business. And starting at a very early age, the boys would start out in the warehouse driving forklifts and loading trucks and making deliveries and things like that. And then the girls in the family, it's a very large family, again, 100 years old. There were 17 cousins in there. The girls would go off to some of the very best schools, the finest schools, and get educated. And then they had to go find their own jobs. And some of these women, one in particular, I was very impressive, got a very high-level job at a large global bank, and very talented. But that talent that she had gained over her education and over her years of experience in banking was never brought into the business until I got a chance to meet her and meet some of the other girls in the family and realize what great experiences they had and knowledge and wisdom. And so when we kind of restructured our governance with that family business, we brought these ladies in at the board level, and they contributed significantly. And the patriarchs of the family business would never have thought about doing it. And in fact, they were quite impressed with their capabilities. So sometimes family stigmas, Price, you asked about that. But do you remember, spilling milk on the carpet or whatever? These family stigmas can get in the way, not only in compensation, but they can get in the way of hiring as well. Again, circling back up, if you can adapt to a philosophy of, look, we're going to put the business ahead of our family traditions, and we're going to do what's good for the greater good of the whole business, do that, then these decisions become a little bit clearer.
I also love it when we have clients that require family members to work outside of the business before coming into the business.
Yeah.
I think that that's very beneficial.
Yeah. But we kind of got off compensation a little bit. But
It's okay. It all comes back to it.
yes, it does.
So, well, I'll bring it back in. Brandy, do you think, with your point you just made, working outside the family business gives them the valuable experience to maybe afford to pay them the market rate? And maybe that family member may not want to come back into the family business if the family can't afford them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's that component of it. And it's too, just that kind of helps mitigate some of the, the nepotism, and really understanding what it's like to really have a position somewhere that you have to work to maintain and continue having that position. I think is valuable, and learning how to work with others and learning just how other businesses operate and being able to bring back that experience to the family business.
I think that's really relevant. But I've seen everything from large corporation that was publicly owned but privately controlled, more or less, by the founders. And whether the company is small or whether the company's large, it really depends on exactly what Rob talked about, is whether we're a family first or whether we're more interested in the success of the business.
Right.
And because if you're going to be the latter, then you got to have the people in the right jobs, and it's not always a family member. That has to enter into your thinking. I've seen both work and both not work, and it really depends on the commitment of the family members to one philosophy or the other. But I think Rob's right on when he says that you got to get that lined up first. That'd be my point of view.
Well, thank you, everybody, for a great discussion. Everybody had great viewpoints, and I know I learned a lot.